This is Steve Downs, the voice of Master Chief, Spartan 117. Welcome to Quality Time, the KO Koala Entertainment Podcast. Anthony and Skylar will take it from here. Master Chief, out.
Hello and welcome to Koalatea Time, the KO Koala Entertainment Podcast. I'm Skylar Sokol.
I am Anthony Nicolosi.
And today we got a special one for you, huh, Anthony?
Super special guest, Dr. Randy Pagulayan, Senior Director of Research at Gaming at Xbox. Holy cow. I'm so excited for this conversation, Randy. We have talked with our patrons. We gave them a hint a little earlier, like, oh, Randy's gonna come. And we have a big Xbox following amongst our community. So anyway, they're super excited as well. Thank you so much for coming on. Randy, Senior Director of Research at Xbox already says a lot, but can you give us a little bit of background on yourself? I think also how you got into the games industry, etc. That'd be cool.
Sure. I'll start with how I got in, but first of all, you guys are the coolest. I'm here because they reached out and irresistibly, I fell in love with you two. Well, one of you, because I just met you you today, but you're on my watch list.
I appreciate that.
I think you're cool too. But yes. So the question was, what the hell do I do and how did I get here? Is that?
Yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got there.
What does the Senior Director of User Research at Microsoft Games do?
What do I go to a lot of meetings. I'd like to think that I get to tell people what to do, but it's not true. It's not true at all. I basically exist, though, as air cover. So people on my team can do awesome stuff, and they can do the consumer research and all of that fun UX, UR, games user research kind of a thing. So I am there as a, what I like to call the SHIT umbrella for the org to enable them to do great things. I've just been around a long time, so I get a fancy title for that.
Right on. I mean, yeah, I got to imagine, especially, we'll get into this later in the talk, but you talk about some synergies between the Xbox research team and other areas of the organization, etc. I'm sure shit comes from every angle at your position in a lot of times. I don't know. Do you enjoy your job now, being Senior Director of Research at Gaming, as much as you did, the prior positions you've held over the years? Or do you sometimes kind of look back nostalgically and you're like, it was funner then, Yeah,
I love the job. It changes all the time. Like, I think the one thing that hasn't changed since 20 years ago to now is that there's no playbook for what the job is. Like, we get to figure it out on a day-to-day basis. No one tells us what to do. And it doesn't matter kind of what level you're in. So yeah, I mean, I miss getting my hands on product and working on actual games. I don't get to do that nearly as much anymore. I get to see stuff and give my 2 cents worth, but that's not my core job anymore. I was just talking with some folks at work about the whole hybrid work scenario thing, and was just reminiscing about the when you got to walk into a game studio and what that's like, and kind of the identity of that studio is physically present, from just the activity of the people running around to what's on the walls to Ensemble Studios as a ridiculous example. The original Age of Empires folks, they used to be in Dallas. Their studio was set up in this huge high rise, but you got to their floor and it was literally Star Trek. Like, it was the Star Trek holodeck, like the hallways, everything was Star Trek, which you wouldn't really think of when you think of Age.
Yeah, right.
Very true.
That's irrelevant. The being in the studio and getting a feel for the creators and that kind of thing, I miss that quite a bit.
Is that something that I'm sorry, Skylar? Is that something that you even before COVID you sort of lose as part of your position? You don't get to walk into studios as much anymore. That's somebody else getting to kind of do that.
I get to walk in the studios.
Okay.
And
okay.
that's a good thing. My position lets me walk almost in any studio that we work with. Almost.
Just let me know, Randy, because I'll DM Phil and I'll say, "Hey, Phil, come on! Like, you gotta let Randy walk into some studios, okay? Poor guys in meetings all the time."
But yeah, I don't. I get to walk in for different reasons, which is not as interesting as like the folks who actually are working on the titles.
Right. And like being the senior director, I presume that you're now so general that you're not really generally working with like specific titles or anything like that. You're sort of in the whole umbrella directing teams working with all different specific titles, right?
Yes. So I don't get to work on individual titles, but I do get to do fun things. Representing the company, working with other platforms, things like that, on kind of industry level kind of initiatives. Some of them are kind of NDA'd behind the scenes, others where we can talk a little bit more about, but like issues around safety and whatnot. We've done a lot of cool work with Nintendo and Sony where, we want to come together and just kind of share principles. We want to share insights. So I get to spearhead some of the those kinds of activities and whatnot, which is super rewarding.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I actually have a question about that a little bit later when we were touching on. But before we get too far, I want to ask you: you have a doctorate in experimental psychology. What is that? Like, like I know psychology generally, but what's unique about experimental psychology?
There's many a flavor of psychology. From your counseling psychology to cognitive neuroscience, perception development, blah blah blah. My wife's has a PhD in psychology as well, but what we do have pretty much absolutely nothing to do with one another. She's neuropsychology, and I have no idea what she does. But she does good for the world, unlike myself. Experimental, at least the flavor that I kind of came from, it's more around experimental design research. We focused on things like perception and cognition, but really where we kind of land is on the actual conducting of research and that kind of thing, statistics, that kind of stuff.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I Googled it real quick and I was like, the answer from Wikipedia was huge. I'm like, what is this thing actually?
It does sound like a logical field to apply to something like UX UR, right? Though, where pretty much you're doing constant experimentation in a way, right?
Totally. Like, so that goes to the you asked me a couple of times and I never answered. How did I get into this? And it was completely on a whim, almost like a joke in some ways, because it didn't exist. Like working in games where as a career, doing the kinds of things that we're doing now, just it wasn't a thing. Like it just wasn't a legit career for folks. So coming out of my PhD, I had an internship. I think I was in Motorola, actually, in Florida, which was the hottest, most humid place on the planet. That was horrifyingly uncomfortable.
And then you literally flew diagonally across the entire country.
Kinda. Like a good friend of mine, grad student, or a guy I knew in grad school, he saw this job description. He's like, they're looking for an applied experimental psychologist who plays video games. I'm like, what is
perfect?
What? Sounds ridiculous. What is that? Like, sign me up. And it was Microsoft at the time, and I applied, and they were like, yeah, come on out for an interview. But I had a plan, which was not that. My plan, finish my degree and then get a real job in industry, working anywhere. Really, that was the plan, but not in video games, because it didn't seem like a legit thing. So I got on a plane and went out, and literally was like, I don't care what happens. this is just experience for interviewing, right? Which seems like a smart thing to do.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
So I went in there all laid back and like, what up? I'm not gonna take this. I'm not gonna feel the pressure because it's not a thing. You know what I'm saying? I had to just play that game with myself. I was terrified, but I still
Like
was
me
just
right now.
I like that. And it went well. I remember talking with folks. Like, it seemed like I think I've said this before to folks. It felt like a startup environment, with a bunch of like fellow grad student, people. I was like, it's pretty cool, but I still don't know. Like, it's not like I had my plan, and then they called me up, I think like the next day, and made an offer, and I already promised myself no matter what, this was not a real thing. So I said no, like any not smart person would do. I was just like, no, I have a plan. So thank you for your time. I was like, what the? And then I went through somewhat of a 2-month existential crisis of who am I? What am I doing? And blah, 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 right? Because I heard about Microsoft doing this Xbox thing, and I'm like, are they serious? I'm like reading up on all the, every rumor website that I could find. But I just said, okay, well, let's talk in a few months. So gave myself time to finish out my internship, where it was wonderful, met lots of really cool people, worked on two-way radios and other funky little things like that. And they still were hiring at Microsoft when it was all said and done. They had a couple more spots, and the offer still stood. And I was like, all right, let's do this.
Sweet.
Huh.
There you go.
Wow, that's interesting. It's so funny that you turned them down.
So was this pre-release of the Xbox, like the first Xbox?
Yeah, this would have been summer of 2000.
Damn, Halo hadn't even come out.
No, this is the same time that they were working through the Bungie acquisition. Like, they were showing up at the buildings the same time that I was showing up. And yeah, it was like the big run to this Xbox thing. And it was crazy town. It was,
wow.
It really was.
That's that. Yeah,
it really
must have been a crazy time.
I mean, there are so many stories on the internet from various developers, like original Xbox developers and platform holders from that time. And anybody who listens to this podcast or follows this in any capacity will get immediately get the vibe that I've been so impacted by the original Halo trilogy in my life. It's completely screwed me up. Like, I told Skylar, I was like, I used to play all kinds of games, then Halo came out, and now I like literally only play Halo. But I'm gonna just interject here real quick, because when I was the way I found out about you, Randy, was, first of all, one day I decided, as I kind of regularly do every now and then, is like, I'm just going to go through our followers, because we have thousands and I'm not exactly sure who's here, especially on Twitter, because it's a little disorganized, bad UX, bad UI. Anyway, so I see Randy there, and I'm like, what? There must be a mistake, and maybe there was a mistake. I don't know, but I thus subsequently Googled around and saw your keynote, and one of the things that you emphasized, I think when I initially reached out to you, I told you, like, the reason why I immediately became a Randy fan is because, like, the thing you emphasized beginning in that talk is the story of Brandon, who has a serious illness. I can't remember exactly what it was, and at the time, wanted to use what's functionally equivalent as like his Make-A-Wish wish for, I think it was called the Rainbow Connection.
Rainbow Connection. That's what it was called.
Yeah, I think it's called the Rainbow Connection.
Yeah.
Go visit Bungie, and you talk about how the user research discipline has an accountability to the equity and fulfillment of these magical experiences, using your words. And I was like, damn, exactly. Like, that's, you touched on it in that talk. And I think almost so many people who are in the games industry would say that it's those magical experiences that kind of pull you into wanting to make games, that when you yourself experience them, right, that draws you to the industry and field. I guess from my perspective, like, how did you guys have any inkling at that time what you were really like about to ship, right? Like from a magical experience perspective, right? Like, I don't know. Did you guys have any inkling of what Xbox, I guess, would become?
No. No. So I can't speak for the my Bungie colleagues and my Microsoft colleagues back in the day. Personally, no. I mean, we made games because they were fun. It's something that was a passion of ours. It was an opportunity to use the skills that we had and just work your butt off to produce something that you're super proud of, right? And it wasn't until much later, and I think I talked about this in the talk a little bit, right? That it took me a while to recognize the reach and and this notion of like privilege that we had being a game creator, and the things that we are creating having the kind of impact that it could possibly have on someone. I never experienced anything like that myself, other than this is badass. Like this is super
right.
For those, and over my career, going to being there at the first like gaming accessibility conference and getting to know the names of a lot of people there and the faces and the stories they were telling really reinforced this notion that, wow, we are in indie developers to the big AAAs to the platform holders. We are in a very, very special, position here to be able to have the tools and the wherewithal, the skills, the creativity, the time. All that's privilege, man. We're lucky to be able to do this kind of thing. And so if we can do this kind of a thing, knowing that it can have that kind of impact on someone's life, like life-saving kind of moments, like I mean, imagine individuals who can't experience life in the way that that most others can, but can find it in games. Then hell yeah, we have a responsibility to do everything we can to broaden the reach, to open as many doors as possible, to contribute that creative, whatever it is, whatever the role is that we play, right, in this game creation kind of a thing, to just get it out there and remove every barrier possible, because it just takes one. I mean, it just takes one kid, one adult, one adult who thinks they're a kid, a kid who thinks they're an adult. It doesn't matter, right? It just takes one. And it makes it worth it when when you can hear their personal story. I was going to tell a story. I don't know if I can because it may be internal, but I know like there's a game that we released recently that had some more socially interesting kind of characters and whatnot, and it was Tell Me Why. It featured a transgendered character. Whether or not that kind of title is going to be a blockbuster in terms of sales and units and drive Game Pass, to me it doesn't it doesn't matter, because the representation, the authentic representation, or at least the effort to create authentic representation for individuals out there to see themselves in that medium coming from on a platform like Xbox, you can't put a number on that. You can't quantify it, right? There's this line where, at least for me, when you ask yourself, is something worth doing? Being I've been in business in Microsoft forever, and there's a bottom line. You got to look at your costs and you got to manage all that kind of stuff.
Right.
There's a certain line around from a values perspective that is just as relevant as your bottom line and costs when you decide whether or not to do something. And putting something out there that enables someone to see themselves in a way that they never would have seen before is equal, if not greater, to that than some of the the financial businessy kinds of things. And at Microsoft, the thing I love about it is that we're willing to do those kinds of things.
Yeah, that's amazing. the kind of like, it's so important to have representation for people who don't get to see themselves in like common media so often, and to be able to do it through a video game, I feel like is even more powerful, just because of the immersive level that you get to in video games. To see that like represented is so cool. And yeah, it makes me really happy that like larger and larger groups and studios and stuff are focusing on these things more and more, and not just like these niche indie games that are coming out of like, you know, tiny studios.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and you're seeing it everywhere too. And it, you know, a game still, I mean, look, you still have to create something that's fun, and
right.
You still have to create something that's kick ass, right? And it's not enough to just inauthentically slap some random gender or ethnicity on there if the game kind of stinks, right? You get you want to put out a quality product, and you know, make sure that everything you do is authentic from the, not just from the representation, but you know, make sure that experience is a good one too, right?
Yeah,
it's a lot of work, but
it reminds me of I played Assassin's Creed Origins somewhat recently, and I read an article about it that said that there were college Egyptian history professors who used that to teach about Egyptian history because it was a more accurate representation of like the Egyptian architecture and stuff than anything that had been produced because of how much research they did. Yeah. And I'm just like, that's so cool. Like if I could I would love to make something that had that kind of like amount of research and care gone into it.
Yeah, no, and I mean, there's a unique aspect, as Skylar was saying, about the immersion. You know, as humans, we Skylar and I talk about, we're like these subjective reality bubbles where, you know, based off of, you don't get any input on what family you were born to, in what era, in one country, and here you show up into the world, and somehow you have your unique physiology, like with your brain that's hardwired a certain way that might make you prone to thinking, I don't know, whatever. And then you have your context that influences how you have, you know, form your social interact, all this stuff that forms this. I think, Skylar, by the way, I'm getting like your static of your mic. You get these like subjective reality bubbles. And we always talk about like, it would be cool to make this game that's like about this, right? Where what we think and how we react and respond to it is so messy, you know, as humans. And at the same time, we also thought like, we're going to have some like sweet mechanics to really carry this game. Like maybe I don't know, the movement is just so, like, something's going to have to be great to be able to carry this forward. But there's, as you know, you form this notion of yourself and within the context of the world around you, and games give you sort of this like safe space to do something similar. And I don't know, at least for me, having played the original Halo trilogy right there during those like years 10 through 14, every time it snows and I go out, I feel like some badass super soldier in the middle of like 2 betrayals, and I feel like I'm so epic. Like there's some things that really attach and I like really influence. That's a more shallow, superficial kind of a thing. But you know, it can. I like you. I've heard, especially now that we have some fans, there are a lot of fans who have reached out to us and be like, that game got me through the divorce of my parents when I was like at an all-time low in my life. You know, that game. I mean, in the Halo community, there's no shortage of stories along those lines. Like, this game prevented me from committing suicide. Recently, there was this article just posted of these veterans who got through their deployment by playing Halo, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, games have a really unique, especially now as a unique responsibility in this regard of like, as you say, fulfilling these magical experiences for people. That I don't know, at least for me, no other medium can really do it the same, you know?
Speaking of these magical experiences, oh, go ahead, Randy.
Yeah, no, well, I was going to say it's funny too, because a lot of times you never know when you work on a feature or you work on a title, like what's going to click with someone, right? There was a story that went around a few years ago about this title called Rally Sport Challenge. And Rally Sport Challenge was the first console game that I had shipped, first or second. That or Bloodwake. Anyways, with the original Xbox. It was just a rally game, right? And it was super fun. You would be sliding all over the place, and rally racing, and um, there was a feature that would kind of save your ghost lap for you.
Okay.
And there was an Easter egg, and all of us had, we had our ghost laps in the game that you could race us. Apparently, side note, I remember sitting in front of my screen for like hours, just lap to tweak out the best score I could get. Buddy of mine who was really he was an awesome, racer in games, and he couldn't beat me my lap, and he was convinced that I had cheated somehow. And I'm like, what are you talking about there? Cheating. Turns out, I think I had recorded my lap right before some final tweak was made to the game.
So you had cheated.
It's possible that I had a leg up, but it's not verifiable. Nobody can prove it.
Amazing.
Anyway, so the ghost lap feature, I guess there was an individual, and this is out there, like I can find it, and I'm gonna mess it all up. But there was an individual who I guess his father had passed away or something like that. But they had played the original Xbox together, and he had found the original Xbox years later and fired it up and was able to find his dad's ghost.
Oh man!
Right, and was able to have this really cool connection. It's just like stuff like that.
That's
You're just
amazing.
like, man, and we don't design for that necessarily. Like we don't.
Right.
Okay, so when someone close to you is going to pass away, we got this great.
Right. Yeah.
We don't do that kind of thing, but again, it's just it's all around us. It's easy to just kind of gloss by it, and not pay attention. But yeah, the opportunities to kind of create those memories and have those moments, it's awesome.
Yeah. I was going to say, I'm curious, talking about these kinds of magical experiences, do you have any personal video game experiences that are really magical for you? I usually ask people their favorite video games, but I think because we're on this subject, it's more exciting to ask you if you have like a favorite gaming memory of you actually playing games, because I know you've worked on them for a long time, but yeah.
Gosh, I mean, nothing that's that.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can't. It's hard to follow that story. I know.
Yeah.
But
I've had just the normal kinds of things that I think you have all had, where the moments where you're playing with your buddies, whether it's in the same room, or online, the moments where your best friend flies out with the girl that he's dating, and then he gets in trouble because all he wants to do is game with you, and then they break up, and then they have to sit next to each other on the plane home. So those kinds of experiences, yeah, totally. It's super memorable, and that was a true story.
What game were you playing in that story?
That was Halo. We were, because you had to do it. I mean, couch co-op was a thing, right?
There's I told Skylar, like I really strongly think I have 5 siblings and my brother under me. I think the reason why I feel like in a lot of times I have a stronger connection with him. A lot of times we're built around the moments where you're just split screening Halo, and Halo 2 in our case. But yeah, my personal favorite game ever. Anyway,
mine too.
Oh,
I think I like Halo 2 better than 3.
same.
Personally.
Notice that Randy didn't say Halo Infinite. Ooh, no, I'm just
He's not allowed. He's not. Don't get him in trouble. Don't get him in trouble.
I am not saying anything about anything that's close or far to release. I mean, actually, I've actually opted out of taking a look at anything Infinite, just because I want to play it as a fan.
Really?
That's
so you haven't been participating in the user research for it or anything like that?
I have not. I see tons of data. I see the reports. I've seen early builds, but I purposely stepped away from any of the opportunities to play the build because I want to be a fan. Like I want to experience it like everyone else.
That's awesome that you're able to do that.
And it's super interesting because we talked actually with a X343 animator, Joe Winter, on the podcast like a couple months ago. Huh? He worked on Song of Iron recently, an indie game of Viking throwing axes. Actually has a great ending. Anyway, he was meant. I asked him a similar question of is there an amount of magic lost when you work on, a game? Like there's, and the way he put it, and I'm curious to see if you feel the similarly. He's like, he says like, yeah, there's a little bit of magic lost when you're behind the scenes, you're making the thing. But the way he thinks about it is that he's giving himself somehow so that others can experience the magic. I don't know. Is that kind of a similar experience for you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I would experience playing Halo 2 or Halo 3 because I spent so much time on it, right? And I don't think it's the same as a general consumer because a lot of times, you look at it and you played it inside out and you know it to a kind of level that's not the way it's meant to be, experienced. But yeah, I mean, I think the thing that always motivated me back in those days was like I wanted to work on something that I could walk into a store.
Yeah.
I could see something on the shelf, maybe see someone playing it and know that I did that little thing, that one power up that's there because of me. Whatever it is, right? Or in Halo 2, for some odd reason, they let me do some UI error strings or something. So there's they needed help with some really random scenario where if something wasn't connected correctly, you'd get this error dialogue, and I wrote that, and it's the most banal, like.
No, right, sure.
There, but it's like I did that, and I put my heart and soul into that sentence to make sure that people knew what was wrong, and that was like, to me, it was the world because you knew so many people were going to touch it, we're going to play it, we're going to experience it, right? So, right. I think it is similar to the other person. Like you put yourself in it, right, on behalf of. Making it that much better, right? To do your little piece. Again, back in those days, I don't think I had as nearly as mature kind of worldview on it. It was really about let's just make it as fun as possible and get rid of all those sections that kind of suck.
Yeah.
So it was a little different back then, but kind of directionally the same thing. You want to help people. You want to work on something that'll touch millions of people, and that's motivating. That's cool.
Totally.
That's awesome. So before we go too far away from this, I'm curious. We're talking about some beloved franchises here in Halo, and you mentioned "Tell Me Why" now too. That seems to have like a kind of like cult following about it now. It's anyway. Microsoft. Almost every studio that they bring on is as a creator of some beloved franchise, and now you bring in Bethesda too. Holy cow! There's like a seemingly unending list of beloved franchises that Microsoft's responsible for. Now, we were talking about the accountability and fulfillment of those magical experiences. How does the Xbox research team help make sure that these studios are, I don't know, evolving these franchises in a way that still feels fresh and new, right? It's a new game, but still, maintaining the core pillars of those franchises that created those magical experiences for fans, right? Like originally one time. How do you evolve Halo and still make it Halo? Basically.
The general philosophy, right, from the top on down with our studios is to really give them the room to do what they can do best, right? At the heart of every one of those franchises is a set of folks with a vision, a magical set of skills, a culture that can't be replicated anywhere else to create something that is super cool that you've never seen anywhere. And back in the early days of Microsoft Game Studios or Microsoft Studios or all the other various forms of the titles that we've had, the publishing arm anyway, there was a tendency to try and almost over Microsoft things, right? The acquisitions, we were trying to be, take the learnings that you have from Big Blue and put in some structure, put in some predictability, put in some process, and that can be hard, right? It can be hard when you start to over process or over engineer a creative process. Now, that's not to say you just let people run wild and then they're going to create something every time. For many people, constraints help facilitate creativity. So I'm not talking about, in general, structure is bad, but I do think there's a line you draw in terms of predictability and letting a studio be who they're going to be, right? Give them the room to kind of shine and be that creative producer of output that they can be. And so if you can do that from there, then, well, what does Microsoft do? What does Xbox Research do? I mean, at that point, we have to be kind of like very malleable, almost chameleons. Like we have to go in there and not introduce things that create unnecessary change, but to have a conversation around, okay, well, what is it that you want to do to take you to the next level? How can we help you, right? We're not here to tell you you're stupid. We're not here to wave our fancy useless degrees and from our ivory tower and tell you how you did X, Y, and Z wrong, because that's not, one, it's not true. Two, it's not cool.
Right.
Don't do that, right? No one wants to be lectured by someone with too many years of education and no practical experience doing anything.
Sure. That's fair.
Right? You really want to go in there and say, hey, studio X, Y, or Z, this is the kind of thing that we can offer. This is the kind of, domain expertise we can bring to the table, and you have a conversation around, well, what lights up for you, right? There's a lot, like accessibility is one of my favorite areas where, every developer we talk to, they want to create more accessible games, but a lot of times they're like, well, where do I start? Blah, blah, blah. And one of the things our team can bring to you is like this notion of, call them inclusive design workshops, which we've developed based on a Microsoft thing from inclusive design several years ago. It's just this notion of, you design for one particular kind of challenge that someone has, and it may end up making things better for all. I'm doing a terrible job explaining it. But if you look at something like, sidewalks, the edges of a sidewalk that have the things cut out and they just kind of go nice and smooth, right? For wheelchair access. That also helps people on bikes. It also helps people who pushing shopping carts. It also helps, a ton of other scenarios, right? So it's just that general concept. And we will do these workshops around accessibility and partner with teams. And if they're in the right place in their development, we're all in. Now, of course, we can also do a bunch of wacky psychometrics and latency research to the millisecond of when things start to lag, blah, blah, blah. But if that's not useful to them, we're not going to say you got to run through our lab so we can make sure that you're 250 milliseconds or under because we don't want cloud gaming to be laggy. Like, we're not going to do that. So you just kind of have to understand what is that special thing that a studio does, and where are they in their journey, and how can we bring our skills to the table to help them get to that next level.
Something that you pointed out along those lines in your talk was that when these Microsoft studios are being brought into Microsoft, the number one thing they were requesting is user research. I mean, in the conversation with Celia, I mentioned this too. From my perspective, UX and UR and these kinds of insights are so powerful that I almost be like, I feel like our UX people should make our game, like because
you don't want that.
But just to say that it seems so obviously helpful, but it's still interesting at the same time too. You mentioned accessibility. Are there any other things that when they approach your team, and actually as part of this conversation, how's that relationship work? Is the Xbox research team sort of integrated into those studios? Like they somehow have representatives in those studios? It's something where like you kind of queue a request to Randy and team, and then sometime you'll hear back. Like, how does that work?
Yeah, let me it's always a fun organizational conversation. We're a centralized team, and so we all report up through this nebulous center. And what we often will do is we will have folks that are dedicated to a certain studio. So we have a handful of people, all levels, that just work with Mojang and Minecraft, right? They know who they are. The goal is for them to feel like they're part of that team, but they still report up through the center. Same thing with, your Turn 10. Like, we have a set of people that just work on, Turn 10 products, Forza and all that good stuff. Same thing with Rare and so on and so on. It's what I like to call the perfect distance, because look, in any organization, you're going to have politics, you're going to have pressures from like your management and things like that. And if an individual needs to tell a development partner or a studio something that they don't want to hear, it's a lot easier to do it if you're there as an independent body. You're part of the team, but you don't report up through them. So that's where that umbrella piece comes in. It's just like, hey, Joe on my team or whatever, yeah, go tell them what you need to do. We got your back. They can't do anything. What are they going to do? Fire you? They can't fire you because they don't report up to you, right? So there is this alignment, and that also lets us people move around. Like, we want people to be able to work on a variety of different things, even from xCloud to platform and services to the game studios themselves. Now we want people to be familiar. Like, we want our partners to know, like, an Exile should know who their research person is. Ninja Theory should know who their research person is, and they should have a relationship there. But at some point in someone's career, if someone wants to do something different, we want to be able to provide that and let them work.
Cool.
Yeah, I'll tell you, at our full-time job, Anthony and I work at the same full-time company as well as working at this company part-time for doing the video game. But I do DevOps at our full-time job, or at least I did recently, and I was under the DevOps manager, but literally like placed on teams in the exact same way. And I can tell you, it makes you way more confident to be like, hey, you're doing this process horribly. We should make it better, when you know that your manager's got your back and you're not like on the team's manager when he's like, our budget can't support that. And I'm like, well, my manager says it's still important.
It matters. It matters. You got to be, and I don't like that queue up your questions, send it into this portal, and then we'll get back to you. That's like a consulting kind of model. I hate that. Only because the relevance of what you return, I mean, from a scale perspective, you can cover a lot more. But, if you guys were to send a request, a research study about the game you're building to some unknown place and then get some report back, chances are it's not going to be as relevant or as good as compared to if I hung out with you guys, I knew what you're building. Let me tell you when the right research should be done, and I show up and it's very like specific to what you're building. You're going to get something that's way more actionable and useful than the fill out a form and submit it, and then hopefully
you reply. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, some teams have to do that just because of the way they're structured. So I don't want to poo-poo on that model, because teams aren't, don't have the luxurious, investment, relatively speaking, that we have, because we were relatively large. But ideally, it's better to go deep and be aligned with a team, so all the nuances and.
Yeah.
Well, this touches on something Celia brought up. It sounds like maybe you run into this too. For sure, based off of your talk you have in your career. But this notion that sometimes devs will reject UX and maybe UR processes and mindsets because there's this notion of like, well, this is science, and that somehow impairs the creative process. I mean, like, again, based off of your talk, it sounds, especially in the early days, you definitely ran into this, building interpersonal like relationships like this sounds like that'd be a very effective way to help build trust in a team and to whatever. But I don't know. Some thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, okay. The first off, an argument that science stuff is not relevant to the creative process is BS because science is life. Let's just, it's like, okay, so breathing, no science in that, or understanding how you can walk and see things. So if we take all that out, you're left with your creative. Even a steaming pile of crap has science in it, right?
Right.
Yes.
Sure does.
Oh, we don't hear it that often anymore. I think, folks, the problem is when you come in and you lecture them, or the problem is when you come in and you try and wow them with all of your academic BS. Like, it's just like anything else. Like, someone on my team, Deborah Henderson, she's super amazing, right? And she's going to give a talk at Grux coming up, and she talks about soft skills as something that's super important, right? And it's not unique. It's super critical to user research or UX, but it's not unique, right? In just people relationships, right? You get to know someone, they're not going to feel as threatened, right? Make sure people understand that you're there for the same reason they are, and that's to make the most kick-ass game as possible. As possible. There's no hidden agendas. There's no conspiracy theories to get your product killed, or anything like that. So it just comes down to be a normal human being. Get to know your partners. Get to know what makes them tick and what they're trying to do. And if you can help them, if you can get them to the point where they have get them to see that you have the same goals they do, and then you can bring something to the table to help solve those, get you to those goals more quickly, then it's not a science versus creative argument anymore, right? It's I'm here to help move things along.
Something that I have no idea why triggered in my brain. There's this book that I read called Thanks for the Feedback by Douglas Stone and Helia Sheen. They're from I think they're both HBR writers or something. Anyway, it's called Thanks for the Feedback. And in it, they have this like 5-stage process of communication where I'm going to repurpose it for our context a little bit.
Sheila Heen? Did you say Helia Sheen?
I think I said, yeah, maybe.
Sheila Heen.
I'm so
I
sorry
for you, just
Sheila
so you
Heen.
can get it right.
So, like, they were talking about this, like, 5-stage process that occurs. This is me saying how silly the creative versus science thing is, okay? Because the 5-stage process of communication, they say, is like stage 1 is like, they call it the gap map, I think, if I remember correctly. The gap map. And because the gap is you, the communicator, have your thoughts and ideas about something, and you formulate something, your intentions of communicating it, and then you actually deliver it. So that's stage 3, actually delivering it, or actually, some behavior you exhibit. I would say in the context of game dev, it's like the creation of the art, the actual making of the game. And then the 4th stage is when the impact it has on the player. And the 5th stage is really the story they come away with of the experience and of your intentions in making that experience, right? So user research, like, you cannot just pretend that stages 4 and 5 don't exist. Like, it inherently, for something like this, for a game to mean anything, to actually be played, like to actually be something, somebody else has to play that. Somebody else has to be impacted by that and come away with a story with that. And you have an idea in your head, right? You have some intention. You talked about how in your talk, how user research has moved beyond just helping realize design intent, but that's still like such a real thing. We run play tests for our game. We kind of move our development process from play test to play test, because what we have found is that the feedback in those play tests is like so ridiculously invaluable in helping us identify where we're coming short on our intentions. Like, people play it and we're like, damn, like, we didn't think you would do that. We didn't think you'd come away with that. We didn't think you'd like that. We didn't think you would hate that as much as you did.
Necessary. It's still necessary. I definitely didn't want to imply, and I'm not saying you said I was saying this, but skip it. Like, we don't need to understand design intent anymore. Like, no, not at all. Still super critical. I mean, it just is. I love that you guys do as much playtesting as you do. Do you do it the same every time? What's it look like?
I was actually going to ask an interesting playtest related question relating to this, but our playtesting, we've done 3 playtests now, moving up to our 4th playtest there.
Hopefully this month
or next month. Yeah. We have a core group of people. We initially did a superfan screener inspired by Game Thinking.
Amy Jo Kim, great book.
Okay.
Which is a book. She talks about how you find your super fans, which is so we just took our friends, people we knew in person who we could bring for in-person playtests, wrote up a survey for them to try and determine who would be like super fans of our game based on various questions. We got them, and we create a core group. We bring them in. We basically have them play through the game, and we have a set of questions we maybe ask them during their play, and then we have like a long form in-person interview or a long form interview afterwards where we ask them a bunch of questions about what they experienced, maybe go back through stuff. And although we've done that process every time, adding or taking away different people, our interview and all of that is always differently crafted.
Cool.
Yeah.
And very importantly, we dedicate time after the playtest to iterate on that feedback. So in some cases, I want to say between playtest 2 and 3, playtest 3 was almost exclusively playtest 2 feedback playtest, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Did we address feedback from playtest 2 well in playtest 3? Because we included, in order to address that feedback, we implemented some new mechanics, some of which have become like, I mean, it is like a key aspect of the encounter of go ahead.
After each playtest, we've added a mechanic now that has become like a core element of the game that like has changed things significantly based on what we saw in the playtest. That not necessarily like changing the design intent or anything like that, but just like making the game so much better and so much more like fun to play. So
yeah, playtest 3 was the first time we came away with it and we're like, you know what? It sounds like we don't need any new mechanics. We just need more content, you know? Like
right on.
So yeah, that book of game, because this is relating to this question. You guys have so much data that you guys have to go through for everybody, because I in a way a bit of a benefit we have. Like I just imagine going through some of those. I'm part of the. I'm saying 3 things at the same time. So you guys going through some of the feedback you have for like insider flights. I'm part of the Halo Insider program. Some of the surveys you guys do and whatever. Obviously, you guys are experts literally at crafting surveys, but I look at our surveys and they've gotten better. But especially at the beginning when we're doing our best based off of books and stuff we had read on good questions to ask during playtest, whatever. They were open-ended. There was tons of stuff to go through there. Sometimes that subjectivity was hard to derive an objective conclusion from. And you guys are sitting on literally hundreds of thousands of like data points for any particular thing. How do you guys like figure anything out with all that data? I mean, I just think honestly, even with
we often, many folks, researchers, you name it, we'll have more data than we know what to do with. I mean, a lot of us, it's just our researcher nature. We want to collect a ton of stuff for exploratory types of scenarios, but the actionable stuff, the thing that we had to learn over time was being as super precise as possible. Like any research study that we would do, we would try and have a very, very specific hypothesis of what really is it that we're trying to figure out. Like it had to be as specific as, can people get through this door? Or, can people, what do they really think about the first, initial 20 minutes or something? And just scope it at that, because you can't really answer every single question that you may have with one survey or one playtest. The more hypothesis driven you can be, the more specific you can be, the more actionable it is, right? And so if I already know, I just want to find out how many people can find the blah, blah, blah puzzle. That's it. There's not much analysis afterwards. Like, oh, crap. 2 out of 30 people found it. I got issues. Now let me look and see, I can skim the open-ended comments to look for supporting things that may be contributing to it, but it isn't like a flatbed of just data that's unstructured, right?
Right.
Because
Right.
and when you add in things like telemetry data, oh boy, it gets out of control, right? Because I don't know, data science would argue with me to the end of time around like having all the datas versus too much data, because if you have too much data from a statistics perspective, you can find whatever you're looking for. That doesn't mean it's meaningful. But
Right.
that's just me. So, less data is more. Less data is more. The more precise you can be in what you're looking for. And there are times where the whole purpose is to be exploratory, right? You just want to let someone go as if they were playing it for the first time and just see what happens. That's cool too, as long as you're intentional about it and you're not trying to do too much with a particular study.
Right. I'm curious. So when you first started, right, it was pre-Xbox days. We didn't have Xbox Live. We didn't have the Xbox Insider program. We didn't have the internet. Well, we barely had the internet like we do today, at least, right? How has like the user research methodology evolved, right? Because back then, I'm assuming you were doing a lot of in-person stuff, like direct interview. Do you still do that? Yeah, writing it down. How has that evolved over time? How much of that do you still do? Do you still feel like that is like the core, and you're like, now we have all this extra stuff like from the betas? How does that data help you more now than just like what's this evolution like?
I mean, there are so many different sources of data available, and they're all better for a particular thing, right? Or a particular scenario. Because, in the usability stuff, you still want to be able to have like a moderated one-on-one session to let someone kind of freeform it. And so you could, poke and prod and really get a sense of kind of what is their mental model and why are they doing the things they're doing. We still want to have that research kind of scenario with just one person at a time. We can do it remotely with tech in a way that we couldn't do before. So that's always going to be there, right? Whether or not you have an insider program, well, you think about the insider population. It's a very specific kind of group of fans that will give you a very unique perspective on what the experience is. If the goal is broadening, if the goal is getting feedback from a certain kind of audience that that's not already immersed in your world, you can't get that from the insider program. Right. So we have to think, well, what's the right format for getting that kind of experience? And then, a whole slew of other types of research approaches that aren't about surveys, that aren't about playing a build and giving feedback, but just ethnography, right? Going out there and understanding how someone, interacts with technology in general in their lives. Like what kind of jobs are technology and entertainment fulfilling for them, which gives us some more high level types of opportunities to think about features that may be way out in the future. We get into international kinds of scenarios, right? Where there's a ton of research that you can do just from hanging out in a place and observing.
Yeah.
Right. It's just a completely different type of insight and analysis that you would do to telemetry based stuff, to post survey stuff. It all depends on what is it that I want to learn. Then you come up with the right method and approach, and sample and from where do you find it? Like there's a time and place to go to Reddit.
Yeah, I was gonna say that it might be silly, but do you guys listen to like the because we know that when a Twitch streamer says something bad about a mechanic, like a huge community can suddenly spawn around hating that mechanic when maybe they haven't even played the game or whatever. Do you ever have like execs coming to you being like, "Why do players hate this mechanic?" And you're like, "No, they don't. It's just that that summit said they should hate it, so they all hate it."
Yeah, I mean, the number of behind the scenes conversations we would have with an exec of being like, stop listening to Twitter, or them admitting that that they need to stop going to Reddit and looking at things like the challenge you have is that is around kind of this availability heuristic, right? If it's up in your face and it's loud, then you tend to think that that's what's happening in the world. And so a lot of times our job is to make sure that the business understands when there's a very vocal minority, right? And it's like you look at the distribution of all the kinds of feedback we can get. These really loud folks really just represent. Where's the camera? I'm in
Yeah.
this much, but we want to get that bigger part of the curve. So that's why we do a random sampling. That's why we do kind of the demographics check and what their experience is. That's why we do kind of take a look at how many hours have you played franchise X or Y, just to make sure that they're more representative of the broader population.
Right.
Again, there are times when you want to go after the hardest core loud because there's something very unique about what you're building that they can provide a level of expertise and feedback that no one else can. And that's a good thing. It has its place as long as you understand where that place is kind of in the broader spectrum of feedback that you get.
So you were talking about before how your team interacts with studios in the event. Like, let's say there's like I don't want to use a real one. That might imply that Rare actually does this. But like in the event that somebody from a particular studio is like, we need to do this mechanic, we need to change this mechanic X way, and it maybe is influenced by what they're seeing on social media or whatever, your team's got data that is contrary to the conclusion they're driving. Do you guys, how much do you guys, vocalize that and put that in front of them? And how much do you give them that creative, freedom to, even in the event that your data is not really supporting the direction they're going in, letting them do that,
that happens all the time, right? Craig and the folks at Rare, they're great partners, but we'll disagree on tons of things, right? The dirty secret, right? If anyone tells you that, that PhDs and user research and UX, by the way, UX, UR, I don't make a distinction. I think it's stupid. It's not it's not going to solve the world. It doesn't mean we're always right. What really research does is risk mitigation, right? Because you can't engineer or predict a hit, right? We did some really, really important work on Halo, right? The control scheme, it wasn't me, it was a colleague of mine, Keith Sturry. He did amazing work in partnership with Jamie Griesmer and those folks. But did that predict what Halo was going to be? No. Like what we do is we provide a set of risk mitigation options for folks by bringing in, getting feedback on something in hopes that it will somehow replicate what it's going to look like when it's out in the real world. Now, when it's out in the real world, you have a whole ton of other things that are happening, from the weather to the dog chewing on your leg while you're playing, to a marketing campaign, or a competitor releases something, or things that are out of our control. Like it's hard to know what's going to catch fire and what's not. It's a hit, games, like movies, other things. We're a hit-driven industry, and so the things that we provide and offer are, honestly, it doesn't sound very interesting at all, but it's a probability. It's a risk mitigation strategy, and we're not always going to be right. In fact, I think one of my friends, colleagues, John Hobson, I always refer to him just because I like to. I think he had was it a talk or was it something he was writing up recently? He was super proud of kind of one of his biggest failures. Like I think he called it like the time I almost destroyed Halo, because he worked on Halo franchise as well. And
shit, I think I read this.
Yeah, we were pushing for something. I think at the time, I think I can't remember the details around it, but anyway, we were wrong. And if they would have listened to us, it would have been very bad, right? So, in a lot of ways, for me, when I see data go against what the design vision is, or what a creative wants to do, one of the general heuristics that I don't know if this applies to everything is that, that creative visionary, how clear can they articulate what it is they're trying to build? Because if it's a little wishy-washy, if it's a little ambiguous, then I'm like, yeah, this is going to fail. You're done. Listen to the feedback. You're done. But more often than not, when someone has a super clear vision of what it is they're trying to do, And what they're trying to do may go against what some of the data is, because it could be innovative. Maybe we haven't seen it before. People aren't good at projecting what they think they'll like, right? If that designer or the developer, they know what it is and they can really, they're consistent. They talk about it in a way that they know. If the data says they're wrong, I'm happy to take a bet on a clear vision than structured research, as opposed to structured research that says X. Creative visionary is kind of an ass and all over the place. That's harder to wrap my head around. And it's like, okay, you're not trustworthy. Let's go with what the data says. But there's definitely going to be times when you just got to let the developer go and look for ways to. Okay, so then we shift our perspective and say, okay, the research isn't about do people like or hate. The research is about you know what you're trying to do. How can I minimize some of those roadblocks that we are pretty sure you're going to run into, right? So we shift the perspective to say, we think you're going to run into this kind of a problem. Let's dig deep and see if there are things we can do to minimize it, because we trust the vision that you're going for, or whatever. It's a super, it can be kind of nuanced, but you know, you get enough reps, you get a sense of like where that line is, and it's hard to train. It's not something you can just, you know, give someone a study guide for. You just kind of have to get the reps for it.
Right.
Yeah, it seems. Yeah, it's kind of like an intangible and this wishy, messy kind of balance game. When you're talking to these people, for example, Craig comes up with a crazy idea, data doesn't back it up, and you're thinking, okay, so now we shifted our focus to we think you're going to run into this issue. How do you go through the tons of research that you guys have done? Because you mentioned this. I have my notes here. Cloud Gaming Insight, Consolidated Gaming Insights tool, I think, that you guys were building internally. So how does that work? Because the research papers I've read are these PDFs that I pay $50 for, and they're not necessarily. I don't know anybody else who reads these PDFs. I must be kind of weird. Like they're not really like nice to read. They're not obvious. They're not exactly a bullet point PowerPoint, you know, of findings. How do you guys like make that all that research over the years? Because you said it was not only your team, but like the marketing research team, syndicated research, all this kind of stuff. How do you consolidate that and then make that accessible? Like you were talking about like scraping tools for the engineering teams. I'm thinking of like this research is like a hash map of sorts, where I have this like key in my head of like controller latency, and then it returns like this whole set of like latency related reports. How do you guys do that?
It's a pain, and researchers hate doing it because they like to just be quick and, you know, give feedback over Slack and back and forth. But here's the thing, like research innovation. Again, I'm going to steal this from Deborah. It's not really a success unless it can be replicated, right? Research innovation is not a success unless it can be replicated out when you're gone. Otherwise, you were a statistical outlier that happened to do something fancy, and then who cares if no one else can actually benefit from it and do it again, right? So if you take that lens and you think about the question at hand, how do you deal with the decades of billions of useless words and phrases and whatnot? It's tough, and you have to be able to structure the outputs in a way that enables you to, like in a taxonomy, right? That enables you to understand the difference between a best practice versus a very precision-based finding that may not actually be relevant anymore, right? You may be able to do a search and find a usability finding on the brute force UI from 2003 that it's like, well, wait, okay, I'm working on UI for a squad command game now, that is not relevant because Brute was terrible, and it's not even the same mechanic. I worked on it, so I can say it was terrible.
I can say
love the franchise. I'm just saying. Anyway, so there's extra work that we have to do. There's a consolidation, right? There's a meta analysis, if you will, where we have to be able to have a system that enables you to accurately capture everything that was happening. But then you have to take the time, and this is a luxury, right? To be able to take the time, step back, read all those, and glean what the principles are to bump them up a level to being a generalized best practice. Because there's no way someone can go in and find a random study usability problem finding here and know that that actually feeds into a broader best practices for mini maps, right?
Mhm.
And it's just it's person power, it's analysis, it's meta analysis. It's just like research in academia. Someone has to do a lit review and then come up with the what really are the generalized findings that we have, and then code it or tag it in a way in the consolidated insights fashion that you can go in and find the best practices for, take touch adaptation, touch controls, right? For cloud gaming. There's a ton of game specific issues that we have in our big database O findings for developing touch for console games on, for xCloud. But if you do a search and you may get a bunch of stuff back about Minecraft Dungeons, and it's like, well, I'm not making a top-down,
right,
Dungeons type game. But if we've done the work to say, okay, in general, there's a general principle around that we found that's based on data and based on real findings that shows that you want to be able to let the thumb placements be moved to different places. It doesn't matter if it's a dungeons or if it's anything else, but you want to provide a mapping that's unique because people may want to hold things differently.
Right.
Right. We had to take the time to analyze all those individual ones. Then we bubble it up to a higher level. So then, new researcher X working with Studio Z, they want to think about making their game touch compatible. You go search cloud gaming. What you'll get is, you'll get all the little stuff, but you'll also get what we call a durable insight that says, in general, make sure that you enable adaptive blah, 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 and blah, blah, assign, resizing of button mappings, blah, 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 for every touch thing. And then it becomes actionable and usable. So it's a lot of work. And you have to be able to separate that.
Over the years, the return on investment, though, of that stuff's got to pay off. I mean, if you, I'm just thinking of like Minecraft Dungeons. If it ships without that control, that's such a huge like experience impact, right? Like, especially as I don't know. I just saw a report like 30 million Game Pass subscribers. A lot of people are going to start playing on xCloud over the coming decade. Those the return on investment on those insights grows. I was telling, I don't remember who I was telling. I think maybe Skylar, maybe it was Josh, another developer of ours. But I was like, well, then what Microsoft can do is once they have this database and they have this tool, they can, offer it as an external service where you pay some amount of like license and then you can get insights. Anyway, so just if you need any business model ideas for that data.
I'm curious, you talked about technology a lot and like using these technologies, this analysis and meta-analysis via this tool and just via, I'm sure, human analysis as well. I'm curious, has machine learning started playing a role in UX and UR at all? When I start thinking about like analyzing large amounts of data, coming to like unique insights, a lot of my mind goes to like it seems like this is a problem that machine learning could potentially solve in some ways, or at least be interesting to apply here.
For sure. I don't have machine learning experts on my team, but machine learning is absolutely a key moving forward. I mean, we're lucky. Like we have, at Microsoft, we have the Microsoft Research Organization, right? And they are just there to do advanced like world-class, crazy town kind of explorations into AI, machine learning, or whatever what interests them. We do a lot of partnering there, but you can imagine things, areas around, text moderation, right? And all
Right.
the going back of it, like using machine learning to be able to pick up, things that shouldn't be there. You can't have an individual sitting there reviewing every single text that gets sent over the system. Machine learning definitely plays a big role in kind of UX, and I just don't. Some things I can't talk about, but I also don't have as much of an expertise in it.
Sure. No, I was just curious. It seems like the logical next step, right, for a lot of this data sort of driven part of the UX process.
Yeah.
Okay, so as we're wrapping up here, Randy, I have a few fun questions for you.
I got a fun one locked and loaded as well.
Well, that's a super fun. I was curious. Let's say the Xbox leadership team comes to Randy's office and they're like, "All right, Randy, blank check. You are allowed to go and run a research study on anything you want." What do you do? Ooh. Any kind of any research study, whatever resources you need. Are you interested in how people play Upside Down on airplanes when they're flying, from 3 different time zones?
Good grief. If I could start any research on any topic, blank check. Honestly, I would want to do research to figure out where the next emerging market really is. I want to get out of, everyone, international is super important, but I'm talking there are places on this earth and cultures on this earth that I have zero insight into. I am very North American centric, and so is our company. And I would love to be able to discover some crazy unknown place on some continent that we're not looking at from a business perspective, and being holy crap, if we could introduce a certain type of digital entertainment gameplay kind of thing, and the form factor is going to look nothing like anything we've ever seen because of the way this population does things, that's what I would want to do, right? And then make sure that solve COVID, and then I want to get on a plane,
right.
Drop me in the middle of wherever this may be, with whatever resources and whatnot, and I just want to immerse myself in because we get into all the, it's very so North American, English speaking centric, and I just feel like there's this untapped world of and it falls, not to get overly cheesy, it comes back to that accountability of magical experiences. Everyone should have it, not just us who speak English, who can afford to buy consoles, right? There's just worlds out there that I am not aware of, that our business isn't aware of, and we're not creating content for, that if we could just learn and see what's out there, that's what I would do.
Sweet.
I'd bring you guys along too. You're cool.
Oh,
okay.
We're in. Count us in.
Skylar's got great taste in food, so that'll help us out. I don't mind clearing, some, weird looking vegetation if necessary. So that could be helpful.
Anthony did have to kill a snake one time.
Yeah, no problem.
Valuable then.
Yeah, see? Yeah. So one thing people might not realize, here's another fun question. You told me, I didn't realize until you told me on Twitter, your team also works on the Xbox E3 briefing. Is that true?
Yeah, that's true.
So I'm curious. We don't need necessarily open up a whole new podcast episode around how that differs from game development, all of that stuff. But how much in advance is your team how much more in advance? Oh my gosh, my brain is
You
failing
got
me.
this,
Before
Anthony.
the E3 conference, is your team involved in that process? Like, we know from what I understand, some of the hashing out of what E3 is going to be starts happening 6+ months in advance. Is your team in there 6+ months ahead of time?
Put it this way, like the way to think about it, E3 and the briefings it's a very iterative process. It happens every year. And so we'll run research, we'll collect data on, on one particular briefing, and we'll do a ton of analysis on it, everything you could think of, partner with the leadership, and debrief them on what went well, what didn't go well. And you end up getting, over the course of years, you end up developing a set of best practices around, like, look, man, people don't want a ton of speakers who just every time they just say, this is the greatest thing that I've ever created. Right? And so we can have data-driven kind of high-level guidance to the business around, you try and reduce the number of speakers that you have, right? Same thing around the game segments. Like, game segments of some rando playing for even like 2 minutes gets pretty boring, actually, unless they're showing you a new feature or doing something different, right? So we're able to tell the business, let's try and create a narrative within each trailer now. Like, don't just randomly show gameplay. You can randomly show gameplay that takes 10 seconds to do. Don't take 5 minutes. If you're going to take that long, tell a story, bring people along, right? And the proper way to tell a story is a well-known thing, right? You introduce a character, you create conflict, hero's journey. You could do it in 4 minutes. Kick ass.
And then Devolver comes along and throws wrenches and all of that, or
you got to keep people on their toes. But, we're now part of a process every year where, as they start to think about what is the story, what's the content, how do we want it to shape up, they'll bring me in at a certain point so I can start kind of providing one, prep the research. So I know what the experience is when it actually happens. And the earlier you bring in your friendly neighborhood researcher, the better it is, because they understand the goals. And then, of course, there's going to be last minute changes here and there and things like that, contracts and whatnot, of what kind of things can we show, what kinds of things can we not show. Especially in a digital era, you have a lot more flexibility for that kind of thing now. And then we will just do this every year. So in some ways, when you ask, when are we brought in? And it's like, it never ends. Because it's an ongoing conversation that you have, right? And they're always thinking about, well, when is the next big beat for talking to our customers and our fan base. And everything from your Gamescom to the summer sums, and we don't go as deep in for all of those because we got to make product as well. But we will be in the room. We will be able to provide feedback. Then we'll do, a big kind of analysis afterwards, to just show how did the messaging go. What titles really got people excited. Which titles were kind of less exciting than others, and
right.
Boring was Phil, right? Which I've told him in the past, and he loves it. He loves when I tell him how great he came across, and inspiring and or boring or corporate.
So were you guys like super surprised that one year when Sony came out and did like the silent E3 where they just alternated between music performances and trailers and stuff?
That thing, I was like, what on earth are they doing?
The data does not back this one up. Like,
well, we do competitive research too, and there was some wackiness there. But that year, if I remember correctly, that was like 2016, 2017.
I think so. Yeah.
They had some really great. The content stood on its own. I mean, maybe that was the God of War reboot.
Wasn't that Last of Us 2 as well? I think?
Maybe, like,
yeah,
they could have like brought circus clowns and you know, done nothing except show that 5 to 7 trailers that they had that year, and the quality of the trailer was so. Yeah, Ghosts of
Tsushima. Yeah, that's right. That was that year too.
The content will always speak for itself, and you just need to be able to give the people who are watching something that they're looking for, right? So understanding that balance between, you know, expectation, delight, how much do you tease? Like, you can have too many teaser trailers, right? And which as a fan, you could be like, I saw no gameplay at all. All I saw were things that were coming in 2020, right? So there's a balance there, and more often than not, you know, Sony they just have really good content, and they know how to entertain and tell a story with their trailers.
Cool,
awesome.
Anthony, is it time to move on to the?
Well, I have my last, not super fun question.
Let's do it.
Okay. I maybe want to start asking this to our guests. I think it'd be interesting. If you were to start your career over, okay? So somebody, I don't know, puts you back in time, and you're not allowed to choose psychology again, okay? You have to choose a new profession. What would it be?
Oh, that's a cool question.
You know, it's funny. I gotta remind myself that any profession worth doing is going to have a lot of crap that comes along with it, and there is no perfect profession, right? Because there's a lot of there's a lot of crap, right? No matter what. That said, if I could do anything, I can't do psychology. Am I allowed to do something in a similar field?
Yeah, maybe eliminating psychology is not super fair, but yeah, maybe just not exactly what
you just can't do UX UR research for games. Yeah.
Okay. I love food. So maybe some type of like, I don't know if I could handle like, you know, being a chef or something. I hear that's pretty like hardcore.
Really?
But
yeah.
Is there like, actually, like I should be more respectful. Any field like this is gonna be hardcore, but I would love to be like someone who just eats food, maybe writes about it.
Nice.
Food
like
critic?
a food writer?
Kinda, yeah. Like, and you know, the job is to like
an Anthony Bourdain or one of those kinds of guys.
Yeah, like someone that people fear. Like, oh my god, what's Randy doing? Like, what's he gonna write next about our food? But then I show up and I'm like a super nice guy, and I'm like not an asshole.
Is this like Guy Fieri, the next Guy Fieri?
God, no, that dude.
Man, but you've got this narrative thought out, man. It sounds like
food truck. That or food truck. There you go.
Well, Skylar, that plays perfectly into your super fun
What a
question.
transition into the really ridiculous part of the podcast. Well, this isn't that ridiculous, but I like asking these two questions to like anyone. They're just ways, I don't know. For me, these two questions just give me an idea of like who a person is. So those two questions are: first, what's your favorite food?
You can't have one, man.
That's true. It could be a genre. It could be like a type of dish, whatever you want.
Foods change with my mood,
Uh-huh.
right? So I'm from Maryland,
Okay.
Suburb close to Baltimore, and there's always a place in my heart for Maryland blue crabs. So real crab cakes, like I'm talking like lump crab, none of that filler crap or the stuff that they call crab cakes here in the Pacific Northwest. That's not a thing. I also, you know, I love Japanese food because it's art as well as delicious. The flavors just are amazing. And I was fortunate enough, I used to go to Tokyo like once a year, and oh man, it's loved like the sushi and all the food. Love that. But you know what? There's a time and place for a crispy taco from Taco Bell. That's so much fun. There is a time and place for that.
3 a.m. on a random weekday. I get you. Like
sometimes you just gotta hit it, and like and do it, like, and not feel bad about it, right? So I love all kinds of food. It's just it depends on the scenario and what's in front of me. I love like chips and dip.
We have similar food tastes, Randy. We're online. I was in Maryland actually like literally a week ago and had a crab cake, and it was like one of the best things I've eaten in a very long time.
My man.
Yeah.
Now there is no other crab cake, but Maryland.
It was so good.
That's just the way it is. So,
all right, question 2. Favorite animal?
Favorite animal.
Not to eat.
Are humans animals? No, I hate humans sometimes. They're super annoying.
Yeah, thank you. I was like, come on, you can't love humans and do user research, right? You gotta.
There was this hilarious, taken completely out of context in one of the meetings I was in with the other day, and I said something about hating users or something like that. Without the quote, they're like, I hate users, Randy Pagulayan, the senior director, and I was like, all right. It was true within the context of when it happened. But that, besides the point. Okay. Favorite animal? The weird looking ones.
Okay.
There's so many.
Weird, like
eye-eyes?
star-nosed mole, or like like a eye, like what's a
I don't know what the names are. There's like I'm thinking of like these weird animals that I see. Like my daughter is super into like animals and deep sea.
Oh,
the deep sea would freak me out.
Yeah, not like anglerfish, none of those.
No, that's the stuff nightmares are made of. Like I'm not into that. But just kind of weird land animals.
Oh, weird land. Okay, that's a broad category, but I respect it.
I'm very inclusive of all the weird.
That's the real UX UR mindset, right?
Right. There it is.
I'm inclusive of all the weird. Yeah, you probably need to be. Oh, right on. Okay, so this is the finale of questions, kind of on the
here, actually, let me ask a question from chat first. Break it up.
Okay,
we had one question from chat. It's pretty goofy, but a lot of people were wondering if you've ever met Bill Gates.
I have.
Okay.
I met Bill Gates on the night of the Halo 3 launch.
Oh, okay.
And,
were you there?
Yeah.
At that one, they have footage of Bill Gates handing over the Halo 3, whatever. You were there at that one too?
I was there, and Don Matrick, who was newly minted the head of the gaming division or whatever we were at the time, ran into him in the lobby of, I believe it says Halo 3, so it was at the Bungie, what was the new Bungie, I think, building, and he was like, have you met Bill? I'm like, Bill who? Bill Gates. And I'm like, no. And like, it was like parting of the Red Sea. Like Don like pulled me over and introduced me to Bill. It was loud, noisy. I had some friends take pictures, and there's this lovely picture of us, like our faces are this far apart because it's super loud, just like with really weird grins. We're just grinning at each other. I tried to say something. He probably didn't hear a word. He was like, and that was it. But yes.
Awesome.
I met Bill.
Great.
Right on.
All right,
Don
Anthony,
Matrick.
give it to us.
Pulling one. All right. Okay. So, Randy, if you have to choose one of these two foods, the other one never exists, meaning you could have never tried it ever before and it will never exist in the future, would you choose pizza or burgers?
It never exists for me or for
anyone. It's just gone.
Everyone. Gone from existence.
Pressure, like taking away.
This is a big boy question.
But they wouldn't know that it had never existed. So you're good. You're not like damaging them because they wouldn't know.
But they would also never know what they missed out on.
That's not that's not how that works.
I would know, right? I would know, and
I don't think you have to know either. There's the social ramifications of this and psychological will not affect you. This is more
appreciate that the social ramifications are being considered on this one.
How guilty am I going to?
No guilt. This is a guilt-free action you're taking.
I don't know. Maybe super guilty.
No, I'd end up giving you a very boring answer around a food that is kind of like the staple to a culture that defines itself. So I don't think hamburgers define anything but like us sloppy Americans like just eating burgers, whereas like pizza actually has, I would assume, has more of a historical,
cultural justification is what we're going for here.
A cultural standing. I don't know. Americana is a thing, I guess, too. Like, go America, I guess. I don't know. I don't know. I would get rid of burgers.
Keep pizza.
Okay. Well, we have not had a
burgers.
cultural justification, anthropologic justification on what choice.
Too. Like, I'm gonna get hate mail now, and because
only from Anthony will you get hate mail. Don't worry.
I'm a burgers guy, but I'm gonna be honest. The chat right now is blown up in support. So our community's very divided.
Yeah, Josh, our other developers in support of you. Evan, our sound engineer friends in support of you. So
but here's another data point. Okay, of the people who generally support pizza, or at least think strongly of pizza, they are from the East Coast. Okay, and I'm telling you,
or Chicago, or Midwest, right?
East Coast is better pizza than what I personally. I mean, pizza I've had is fine, but from my perspective, it's just like appetizer food. It's not really. I ate a whole pizza, and I'm like, I'm not full yet, So anyway, my family's from Argentina. There, everything is meat. Like your salad is a chorizo. So
nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that. So for me, burgers are going to take the win in that regard. They got more meat than a pizza. But anyway, very super.
I like this anthropological argument. Yeah, it's a good one. That's a nice one.
Yes.
I don't know if it's justifiable or accurate, but let's just pretend it is.
Well, we can do a user research survey in Italy of what they think about your answer, and we'll get back to you.
Fair enough.
Right on. Randy, thank you so much for coming on. It has been a blast. I can't wait to rip this content apart for everybody else on our community and everything. I know they're gonna love it. So many cool stories. Thank you so much again for coming on, and thanks for helping make Xbox way cooler. Based off of our conversation, I feel super confident that you, unlike what you said, I think you are definitely helping improve people's lives for sure.
Thank you guys. This was a lot of fun, and thanks for reaching out and just having a conversation.
Yes,
it's all good. Even just from the Twitter when you reached out, I'm like, hey, of course I'll talk to you guys. Whatever.
Yeah, it was awesome.
That's
Thank
awesome.
you.
Hopefully we get to meet in person one day, maybe at GDC or something.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, happy to. And if you have follow-up questions or anything you guys want to throw at me later, you know how to find me. And I also would be happy to help you out with your survey design if you want.
Oh shit, Jeff. We could definitely use.
Yeah, I think at some point we'll be moving from our, very janky in-person interview our friends sort of playtesting to some sort of more online-y thing, and that's where those surveys will really start being challenging. So,
happy to help you guys out any way I can, for real.
Randy, if people want to find you, where can they follow you or get some more information about Randy Goodness?
Gosh, I'm like,
is Twitter the best place?
Probably Twitter. I don't do very much else.
That's good for you.
I think I have an Instagram. I don't really use it. But yeah, Twitter. People can find me on Twitter, and for those businessy types on LinkedIn and that kind of thing, you can also find me there as well.
Right on. Randy Pagulayan, Senior Director of Research for Gaming. If you're listening to this, you can find information about our studio at koalaentertainment.com, which is currently midway through a serious facelift. I am so excited for you guys to see the new website.
It's cool. What Anthony showed me so far is very cool. Oh my God, my cat is so angry.
Big facelift. There you can also find a link to Agora, our upcoming single-player physics FPS for Steam, and we're also working to get on Xbox as well. So yes, if you want more information about the game, if you want to wish list it, that would help us so much. You find links to all our social media. Thank you everyone for listening. Thank you, Randy, for being on.
Thank you guys.
The most exciting level for Anthony that I've ever made for the game, yesterday. So get hype.
Yes, Skylar made a new Agora level that fills my Yeah,
Since the very beginning of our game concept, Anthony has been talking about this thing he loves to do in our game that's not a mechanic. It's just something that you can do that's stupid. And finally yesterday I was inspired and I was like, all right, I'm going to finally make a level on this thing he's literally been talking to me about for 3 years. So it's a year now.
Can't wait to see it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Randy.
All right, guys.
We'll see you.
Gentlemen.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.